So we want to create a folder structure that we can start to keep everything organized. So if you're a Mac person or a PC person, doesn't matter. The quickest way to get to an area where you can get to saving stuff is by hitting the Windows key and then hitting E. And what that does is it opens up a Windows Explorer. Okay, so hit Windows E, and then that will do that. Okay. Now these computers have the C drive protected. Okay, the C drive on a PC is the main drive. All the applications are installed. Your desktop is on the C drive. If you save anything to the C drive and the computer reboots, that stuff is gone. It automatically gets deleted. Okay, so never save stuff to the desktop or the C drive or anything. These computers should have a P drive. Okay, that's where you should be saving your stuff. So go into your P drive. You can click on this PC or P drive, whichever way you get there. And you're going to make a brand new folder. Okay, the quick key for new folder is Control-Shift-N, or you can right-click and say New Folder. Okay, so if you haven't had this yet, so put in your last name underscore F17. And what that's going to do is it's going to let us know whose folder this is. So whose folder is it? It's Sarcona's, because that's my name. And that's going to have underscore F17. If you have a sibling in the class, I would also put your first initial, right? That way it's separate from theirs. Yeah. So Sarcona S, whatever it is. Okay. Here's another piece of trivia. On a Mac, if I have two folders of the exact same name, and I drag one folder into the same folder as that, it erases this other folder and puts that one in there. Okay? So if I have a Sarcona F17 folder on this computer, and then I have one on my thumb drive, and I drag one into the other, it doesn't care what's in this one. It'll delete it and put the new one in its place. On a PC, it merges those two folders together. Okay? Now, why is that important? Because I may grab just one item from this folder and bring it somewhere. It's very easy to accidentally delete stuff on a Mac when you do that. Okay? So just be aware when you're copying stuff back and forth that you don't accidentally delete stuff that you don't want to. Okay? All right, so inside your folder, we're going to make a brand new folder called 2510. All right, 2510 is our class number, right? So that way we will know whose it is, we will know the semester, we will know the class. That way we should not have any issues. We talked about portfolio stuff last time. When you get to the spot in your career where you're going to your portfolio and you need some of your previous work, you'll know. There's my 2510. That's when I took the Intro to 3D. That was that semester. Here's all my work. And you can get to it very, very easily. All right, inside that folder, do you see how we have on our cheat sheet here, there's a thing that says your last name underscore project name. Okay, that's where we're going to start this organization per project. So we're going to make a new folder with your last name underscore, and this is going to be called Miniroom. Okay, the project that we're building is called Miniroom. So Sarcona underscore Miniroom. Again, I know whose project it is, and I know what project that is. And again, make sure you guys put your initials in there too. Okay. Cool. So now inside that folder, and tell me if I go too quick. Cool. Inside that folder, that's where you're going to create these other subfolders. So where you see textures, scenes, renders, final, and reference, that's where you're going to make those. Cool. All right, so every single project that we do is going to have this structure to it. Okay, so when we make our next project, which is going to be the title sequence, we're going to have the same folder structure. So do we want to, when we make our next project, make this whole folder structure again? Yes, we do. But we don't want to have to do all that work again, right? Especially now, everything is already empty, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to copy that folder and make it as our template, okay? So if you're a Mac person, here's a quick way to get back to that previous folder, is you can click on any one of these buttons up here, okay? So if I go to 2510, it takes me right to that area. Now you can Control-C, Control-V, that's a copy-paste. You can hold down the Alt key and drag, not Alt, sorry, Control key and drag it, and that'll make a copy. It's another way. But you just want to get a copy in there, and then just rename this to your last name underscore template. Okay? So now we are going to have a template folder, so that every project we can just copy this template, rename the template area, and then we would have all those folders already set up for us. Okay? Always look for hacks. Always look for ways that you can speed up your workflow. I already know every project is going to have this structure, so I want to set that up right now. Okay? Cool. If you don't get all those folders yet, don't worry about it. You can add those later. Just remember to add them later. Okay. All right, so now we can close all of our windows. I have a bunch of windows open. Now, we're going to open up Cinema 4D. If you're in the previous class, I'm going to use the same joke, so just play along with it, okay? So, if you're a grandma on Windows, you would most likely scroll your Windows key down here to the bottom, or your mouse down here to the bottom, and you would grab the scroll bar, and then you would look way down here, and usually you go too fast because people don't know. And then they say, nope, I don't see it. Then they go way back up here, then they go here, then they go there. This is like a waste of time. Milliseconds of your life are being eaten away by this, okay? So all you have to do is on your keyboard, there's a Windows key. You tap that key, and then you start typing Cinema. C-I-N-E. Voila. Cinema 4D pops right up. I didn't have to type the whole thing, right? And then you can hit Enter. I'm still looking into this. I'm not sure if the student license is for version 18 or 19 or 17. Okay?
17,
the student one? Ours is 17. But the one that I have the keys for, I'm not sure is 17, 18, or 19.
Okay, I was gonna say.
I believe that they work for anyone. So if you were to download 17 and use the license key, it would work. Or if you downloaded 18, it would work. If that's the case, don't install Cinema on your computer yet. Wait until we get 19, and then I'll give you the key for it. Okay? That way you get the latest version, because the second that the college gets 19, they're going to install it in these computers. There are some subtle differences between 17 and 18, and I'd rather you just not get confused. Nothing we're going to do right now is going to be insane that you should need to really come into lab or work from home for. Maybe come into lab, maybe stay a little bit later, come in a little earlier. Nothing crazy. All right. So this is the 3D interface. Okay? People who were in the last class. Carmisha, you were in the last class, right? And you were in the last class. Who else was in my last class? That's it? Just two, right? Can you? Yep, okay. So people who were in my last class, do you notice anything about the colors of those axes? Do you see the arrows right here?
They're primary colors?
They're primary colors. So what does that mean?
For light.
They are primary colors. Oh, they're not. Sorry, yes. No, they're not primary colors.
For light.
For light.
Light's different than...
Yes, for the light on our screens. But they're red, green, and blue. So what did the red one mean in After Effects? X. Yep. So in After Effects and in 3D, the red is X. The green would mean Y. And then the blue? Z, right? So RGB, XYZ. That will be a universal color combination across, as far as I've ever seen, across every 3D application I've ever used. Okay? So regardless of that, you need to pay attention to those colors. Notice how in this case, it's a little bit hard to see on the screen because it's thin. Notice in this case though how the green is facing upwards. Okay? Some 3D applications, the Z is facing upwards. Now that doesn't mean anything crazy to us, except for, let's say we went to 3D print something, right? 3D printing, the software we use, Z is up. So when I model a car and I bring it in, my car is like this. So then I have to make sure I rotate it down so it doesn't print weird, okay? Just be aware of that. For what we're going to be doing, it's not going to affect anything. We just need to know mentally that Y is up. So what we want to do is see how we can navigate this. So for now, we'll just set our card to the side. We don't need that right now. we will need our hotkey sheet. Okay, so keep your hotkey sheet handy with you every time you come to class. There's a few ways to do everything. Don't think that my way is the only way to do it. This is just the way I do it because this is how I've always done it. Okay, I need to do three things. There's three major things in every 3D app that you would do to be able to navigate around, right? So like if you're in Photoshop, basically you would zoom in and out and move the canvas around. Those are the two things you would do. With 3D, we also have the ability to spin around. Okay, so that would be the third thing we'd want to do. So to spin around, we have to use both hands. Okay, this is one way, is to use both hands. So I always keep my left hand nested right on the bottom left of my keyboard. Okay, so keep your hand in the bottom left region of your keyboard. The other hand's going to be on the mouse. Hold down the Alt key and left drag. Left mouse button drag. Okay, do you see how we're orbiting around or spinning around? Is anyone not spinning around? No, everyone's cool. All right, so this is called orbiting. And what we're doing is we're being able to spin around our model so that we can see it from different points. Okay? So if I modeled a cube and I want to see the other side of it, I would hold down Alt and I would spin around the cube until I get to that other side. Okay? So that's the one that Photoshop and those other programs can't do. The hotkeys in here are pretty simple. If we hold down Alt and we middle mouse button, this is called tracking. And it allows us, it's not like 3D tracking or 2D tracking or motion tracking. It's basically just moving around. It's like if we had the hand tool in Photoshop or Illustrator and we're able to move that document around. Okay, so Alt left is our orbiter. Alt middle is our tracker. And so what do you think zooming is going to be? Right. Correct. So it's Alt right mouse button and we can zoom in and out. Okay. Now those three things may take you 2 or 3 or 4 weeks just to get into your head of what they're supposed to do and how to work them. Don't be afraid of that. The only way you're going to get good at it is by constantly doing it over and over and over again. Okay? Most of the work that we're going to do is going to happen right here. This is our workspace. In 3D, think of it more like sculpting. Okay? In Photoshop, you would draw stuff, right? So you're just drawing pixels. In 3D, we have to think about not only what we're seeing, but how it's forming all the way around the object. So we're constantly going to be spinning around it, zooming in and out, panning, looking at it from different angles, and trying to make sure that it looks good from not only where we're seeing it, but from every angle. Okay? So Alt left, Alt middle, and Alt right are our three keys. Now, that's one way to do it with our both hands. Now, if you lean back in your chair and put your feet way out and just put your other hand like dead at your side, this is how some people like to do it, where they just come up to the top and they just grab stuff. Okay? This is the lazy way to do it, where you're just like, I don't even really care. Just clicking and dragging. Don't do it that way. Stay active in it, okay? Left hand is going to be in the bottom left. Get those hotkeys as quick as possible, and you'll see how quick you can go with this. All right, and you can see how I'm like zooming in and out and kind of moving and kind of spinning and whatever else. At some point, you will get lost in your world. All right, now pay attention to this too, because I've kind of gone a little bit further out.
You're like upside down.
Exactly. Look at my Y direction. Is it now facing up? No, it's facing down. So if I was to add a ball and I started to add gravity to the ball, where's it going to go? Up. Okay? Now, in most things, it's not a huge deal, but we always want to be aware of that and make sure that we are flipped correctly over. Okay? So I'm just going to rotate until I get back over to that side. The other thing that we want to look at is scale. Okay? So in, yes, thank you. In a document in Illustrator, the first thing we do is we make a new file and we tell it the dimensions. It's going to be an 8 by 10 image, or it's going to be a 16 by 32, or whatever it is. Okay? When we have that document, we're basically getting ready to print it, right? Or we're going to make the document and bring it into After Effects, or we're going to make the document and put it on the web. We have our end result ready to go. In here, we don't have to worry about that too much, okay? Because this is 3D, if we modeled something this big, we could render it out really at any size that we wanted to, because it's a solid object. Think of it like vectory, okay?
Like an illustrator.
Like an Illustrator, right. Okay, so if we have something this big, we can make it huge and we won't lose any of the resolution, all right? So we don't really care about resolution at this point. We don't care about any of that stuff when we first start working. We're literally just going in there and we want to make sure, the biggest thing is proportions. If I model a desk that's this big, I don't model a chair that's that big, okay? That doesn't make sense, okay? Now I could shrink the chair down and make them fit together, but if the desk is like this long, it doesn't matter how much I shrink that desk, it's going to look funny, okay? So always think about proportions. The best way to do that is always having reference. So just as a, for instance, so if I'm modeling something, this is a common thing, and you may not have ever done this before in Photoshop or Illustrator or anything, is to actually go into the measurements. Like, what are the proportions of a desk? In this case, it's 60 centimeters by 121 by 76. I don't care what the units are. All I care about is the 60, 121, and 76. As long as those are all the same, centimeters, it's perfect. I can go to my 3D app, I can make something that's that size, and then when I start building other stuff to the same-ish sizes, it'll make more sense, okay? But if I build a desk that is 500 by 60 by 76, and it's this really long desk and it's really tall and like this narrow, it's going to look funny, okay? So be concerned with proportions and don't be afraid to go out here and get some measurements if you're not sure about it, okay? Initially, it doesn't matter. Initially, we'll be able to tweak stuff and modify it and whatever else. But long game, you want to be at least trying to think about those things in the future, okay? All right, so let's build a cube inside our scene. So a couple ways. Under Create, Object, you can go and pick one of these objects here. I'm going to grab the figure. Okay, so create object and then pick one of those objects in there. If your object doesn't show up, just go back and pick a different one. Some of these don't show up. Okay, and then spin around that object. Now, do you notice anything weird happening? What was that? He's going through the floor, yep. That may happen. Evans is doing it. Mine's doing it. Watch what happens when I spin around. Okay, see how it's spinning really nice right here? Now look how he's spinning around. See how he's not centered anymore. Okay, so one of the things that the software does is based on where my camera is, that's how it's going to spin around that object. All right, so to me that's like incredibly annoying. So I like to change that like right away. So under cameras, okay, see how there's a sub menu here? Under cameras navigation, I always use object mode. Okay, so cameras navigation, use object mode. And what that's going to do for you is every time you rotate around an object, it's going to spin around that object. If I have 50 objects, whichever one is selected, that will be the one I get to spin around. Okay? All right. So you'll also notice that we have some arrows on here now. So I have a green, a red, and a blue. Okay, or a red, a green, and a blue. That's our move tool. Okay, by default, that's the tool that we would get if we wanted to adjust the position of our character. And you can see we can adjust XYZ, just like we could navigate around the XYZ. So I'm just going to move him up. So I'm just going to grab the green arrow and just drag him so that his feet, in my case, are on the ground. You can just drag yours until yours are about on the ground. In the 3D world, it really doesn't matter if something is on the ground or 50 feet up or whatever. OCD wise, we want stuff to be on the ground because it makes it a lot nicer. Okay. You'll also probably notice that your object has probably a thin orange line on it and then a dot of orange somewhere. So like on mine, if I look at the head, there's a tiny dot right here and this line that goes through it. That's kind of like a settings manipulator. So if I want to change his height, I could just grab that and it'll let me change the height of that character. Okay? It's spam. Okay? If you create other objects, each object will have their own set of parameters. If I go to capsule, you'll see that capsule has two different manipulators. There's one on top that allows me to control the height of the capsule, and then there's one on the side here that allows me to control the width of the capsule. Okay? So each object you create will have that ability to tweak those settings. Now there's other stuff that we can also adjust. That's not the only ones. These are just like the popular ones. So when I make a character, or I make a sphere, they already know you're probably going to want to adjust this parameter or that parameter. Okay? So that's the ones they leave you with. Now if you click on your object, okay, so you can click off and then click on if you need to. You'll notice over there on the right side of the screen in the bottom that you have some extra options. Okay? Where'd my pointer go? There you are. Over here, you'll see it says basic, coordinate, object, slice, and Fong. Okay? So basic, coordinate, and Fong are ones that every single object will have. All right? And then object and slice are two parameters that are specific to this object. If I clicked on my human guy, you'll see that he just has object. He doesn't have slice. Okay? So I'm going to go back to that object there. And you'll see that there's a couple things. One's radius, one's height. Remember this? This is my height. That's my radius. So see how it's adjusting those parameters for me based on how I'm sliding it. The other ones that are there are not as popular. So that's why they don't have an extra little slider for it. But I can still manipulate it. Okay? Anytime you see one of these double arrows in Cinema, you can click and drag on that slider and it'll manipulate the settings. Okay? So if I want more cap segments, I can click and drag up. If I want less, I can click and drag down. Okay? Now you're not going to notice a huge difference once I hit a certain point, but you can definitely see how that rounding in there is definitely changing what it looks like. If I do the same thing with rotation segments, it's just changing how that's looking. Okay? Height segments. If I go to slice and I say, yes, I do want to slice this, and I start playing with these, let me spin around so you can see it better, you'll see that this definitely does change how it's looking. Okay? So there's more options than just what you're seeing on the screen. So a lot of times in 3D, we start off with a basic shape, modify these settings, and then go from there, right? So if we were to build a desk, we might build a flat plane and build a desk off of that. Or we might build a cube and start deleting stuff. Or we might build this and then start building a chair out of that, okay? We might build whatever, okay? You'll get more of these things as we go along. All right? So now this is basically in what's called, there's really a name for it. No, just the object, okay? So the object is there and it has these parameters, but we really can't edit the actual geometry of it yet, okay? So if I want to take the top point and I want to push it down so that it's flat, I can't do that yet because the object is basically just like a little plug-in that's running right now. So on the far top left of your screen, you'll see there's a Make Editable button, okay? What's the shortcut key for Make Editable? C. Yes. So we hit C or we click the button and that allows us to edit it. Now you'll notice that when I click that button, those two options over here on the right disappeared, right? We no longer see object or slice. Those two are now gone. Okay, so we've accepted that we want those two things exactly as they are, and now we want to be able to tweak the shape of it. Okay, so we can move our object just like we did before, right? We've made it editable. But here's where 3D is a lot different than some of the other stuff. Down here on the left, you'll see that there's 3 buttons. One of these is points, one of these is edges, and one of these is polygons. I call it faces. The points one, if you click on that, you'll see the actual wireframe of your shape. Okay? So what this is every single piece of geometry is composed of these tiny things called points. Okay? So a point is that point right there, this point here, and so on. The points are connected by edges. So here's a point, and there's a point, and you can see there's an edge connecting them. And then when you have enough edges connected, that makes a polygon. Okay? And that's what we actually see. We never see edges, we never see points, we only see those polygons. But we can manipulate all 3 of them, right? So if I click on this top point, you'll see it goes to the move tool, and then I could push that down. Okay? It looks horrible, right? Now, if I look closer at this, the way that it creates these surfaces is it's actually a hollow surface. So even though that looked like a solid 3D object a second ago, it's actually a shell of a surface, okay? So don't think that any of your 3D objects are actually like a solid thing. Mindset-wise, they're not, okay? But whatever we make them look like, then that's what they should look like, right? So if we have a sphere and we put a bouncing ball texture on it, it'll look like a bouncing ball, but it'll still be hollow, okay? Some people have a visual thing with thinking everything's solid, but it's not. Not that it matters, but just so you're aware, okay? So it's open. I can move all of the edges or all the points around. If I click on the edges, I could then click edges and move those around. I can click on faces and move faces around. Glorious. Okay. Now there's also a bunch of tools. If you just right click right on your object, that's a whole list of tools that we can pick from to manipulate the surface even further. Okay. Some of these we will use over and over and over again. Some of these we will only touch on rarely. Okay. Something like the bridge tool I use kind of sparingly. Something like the knife tool I use probably like every third tool I'm going to grab the knife tool. Okay, because it's one that I constantly use. Same thing with extruding, and I use bevel quite often. Okay, but there's a lot in there you won't use, so don't get overwhelmed by that. All right, so now what we're doing is editing the components of it. The second we clicked on this button to go to the points, we started editing components. Okay, so we're no longer editing the object, the entire object shape. We're editing components of it, and so that's what this is. So if I click back here, that brings me back to the model, so now I can move that model around. Okay. You'll notice too that there's we have the red, green, and blue arrows. There's also these like red, green, and blue corners. Okay. And what those are for is allowing us to move it in just 2 directions. So let's say I'm going to delete this thing because it's hideous. Let's say I have this guy here. I want to keep him on the ground, but I want to move him way over here to this corner. Instead of me grabbing the red and then grabbing the blue, I can just find the one that is flat, like this, and just move him over there. Okay? That way he stays on the ground, and he just moves in those 2 planes. Okay? Again, you will not be experts in these tools right away. You will get better at them the more you play with them. All right, so we know how to move stuff. We know how to get to the components of it. How do we do some of the other stuff, right? So let's go to scale, all right? So scale is the T key. So if you look at your hotkey sheet, you'll see that scale says T. So we want to hit T. Now this brings up, again, red, green, and blue, but you'll see their boxes. So again, a little indicator they've changed what the stuff is. They're changing what they're showing there. Yes, ma'am. All right. So you'll see we still have the boxes here. And now we can manipulate this. So I can grab just the green and stretch it up, or just the red and stretch it up, or just the blue. Now obviously on this character it looks disgusting. It looks like really distorted. Okay? I can grab just these two and stretch it up, and now he's kind of flat. And then give him thickness. Okay? So we can scale also. We can rotate. So if we hit R, we get circles. And those circles mean that we can rotate our character in a X, Y, or Z direction. Now with this one, it's a little bit different. If you click and drag not on one of those lines, you'll see what it does, where it rotates it in this kind of funky direction. Okay? Always click and drag on the line. Whenever you rotate, grab the lines and rotate on those lines. Okay? Now, just like some other programs, they have constraining or snapping. So in Illustrator, you want to snap rotation. What would you hold? Shift. So if we hold Shift, see how it snaps those rotations so we can get it exactly where we want it. Okay. And if we hold Control, look what we can do with that one.
Oh yeah, it's controls like copy.
Right.
Like everything.
Just like in other Adobe programs, you hold Control and drag it, it's going to copy it. Remember in Windows when I copied my folder, I hold Control and drag it? Same thing. Now also pay attention to this box in the top right. See in mine how it says figure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Every object gets listed. Okay? That is not a layering system. Okay? Any layering system that we ever use in 3D is simply for organizational purposes. It has nothing to do with what we see as far as a stacking order, right? So in Illustrator, if a layer's up here and another layer's there, then this top one is more visible than the bottom one if they're on top of each other, right? That means nothing in 3D. We can delete stuff, so we can highlight stuff here. So if you have trouble selecting a specific item, you can grab it from this list. You can delete stuff. You can click on that item and go down here to coordinates, and you can reset stuff. So I can just say 0, 0, 0, 0. There we go. And now he's back to where he originally was when I imported him the first time. Okay? So grab your character or whatever you have, delete all the extras, and then go to the coordinates and reset the outer ones to 0 and the middle ones to 1. Okay, so each one of these pieces could actually be separated and moved somewhere else. If I hit the C key and open this up, you'll see how each one of these pieces on him is actually a separate piece. So here's his left foot.
How do you open that up again?
You have to hit the C key first to make him editable, and then you just expand out.
Oh, I see.
Okay? So each one of these objects is a separate thing that could be moved and placed and organized and whatever else. Bless you. All right. So we've gone through a couple of things here. Now the major stuff we're going to touch on is the Make Editable button, which really is just like set up my base object and then hit C most of the time. We've gone to the model area. So anytime we want to move the entire object to a certain spot or scale it or rotate it or whatever, we'll make sure we're on there. If we're editing the components, we'll play with these 3 buttons. Okay? Those items we'll be playing with again on a daily basis. Okay? Every time we create an object, we're going to have to move it. We're going to have to adjust its points probably. We're going to have to adjust some of its components. Otherwise, we're going to be left with the standard objects like a cube or a cylinder or whatever. We're going to have to do any moving, rotating, or scaling. You'll see these here up at the top. Those are scaling and rotating. Moving is E. So if you ever need to get to the move tool, it's E. Every 3D program, this is one of my big annoyances. They're all different. In Maya, in Cinema, rotate is R, and that makes 100% sense. In Maya, rotate is E. I don't know why. They could have just switched them. Whatever. So in this one, it's ERT. ERT. Okay? Now you could hit... Oops. There we go. You could hit the space bar, and that will switch you from whatever tool you're on to a selection tool. Okay? So this is a rectangular selection. So you know your marquee that you would have in Photoshop, Illustrator, whatever? That's where you could use that marquee and select multiple items and move multiple items over if you needed to. Okay? And then I could just tap the space bar back and I'm back to where I was. What else? We can lock stuff. So up here at the top where it says XYZ, we can actually lock which direction we want to move something in. So if we know, in this case, let me grab his head here. In the case of his head, I don't want to be able to rotate, or I don't want to be able to move it in the Y direction. So I could turn that off, and now, oops, I lied. Oh, sorry. It's the rotate? Alright, it's not playing nice right now. No, it's grayed out. Alright, it just doesn't want to play nice. That's what it's for. I never use it, but I just wanted you to see it. Over here is rendering stuff. Okay? So this is render view. So if you click on render view, it'll render what your stuff is looking like. Okay? And you can see the hotkey, Control R. So if you render something, what typically happens is your screen goes black, and then you see your object in a little bit better view. Alright? When you saw that fidget spinner in the 3D software, it looked pretty dull and boring. It was just like flat coloring. And then I started applying materials to it to make it look reflective and make it look shiny and make it have shadows and some glossiness to it. That's the rendering part. Okay? If we tried to work in this viewport on that fidget spinner while it was full resolution, it would go incredibly slow. So what the software does is we work low resolution inside the software, we hit Control R, and then it'll calculate the better looking version of it. Okay? So this scene, as being a blank scene where we just drop this guy in, he doesn't have anything else in the scene except for him. So that's why he looks pretty dull and boring still. But that's what this is for. This next one will open a picture viewer. Don't worry about that yet. There's our render settings. Remember I said there's more than one way to do something? So we went to create objects and picked an object. We can hold down this button here and create objects this way too. You can see there's the figure, here's the cone, whatever. Here's some other stuff for creating some different curves. Has anyone ever here done spinning wheel pottery or throwing wheel? Yes? Awesome. It's awesome. It's incredibly fun and addicting. In that process, what you're doing is you're defining the contour of your shape, right? So this piece of clay is spinning around super fast, and you put your hands in a certain spot and you're pushing the clay in. And what it does, it creates these contours that revolve all the way around. Okay? It sounds more complex than I'm probably making it. But we can use basic curves like this here to create those contours, to create shapes that would automatically revolve around. Okay, so basically we can create a profile and say revolve, and it'll create those surfaces. We'll get into that later too. We can do some advanced stuff here with some subdivision surfaces and lofting, and there's that lathe tool. There's some deformers that we have right here, so we can deform some of the stuff. We can put a floor on this so that we have a floor. So when we hit render, our guy actually has a floor. And now he's in the ground, so we can move him back up to the top. There we go. So now he has a floor. We have some camera stuff, so we can actually play with cameras. Think of this like the real world, okay? If you wanted to videotape something, you have to have something to videotape, obviously. So if I wanted to videotape this, I would have to build this in 3D. If I wanted a liquid inside, I'd have to build that liquid. If I wanted a label on here, I have to build that label. The label is probably Photoshop. The bottle is 3D. The liquid is 3D. This little bumpiness could be 3D or 2D. I have to have a camera that can videotape this item. I also have to have lights to shine on there. I have to have a floor to catch the shadows. Okay? So think about all the stuff that goes into an actual production, and that'll make it a little bit easier to figure out what you need to do. So when we have a camera, that's what we would typically be rendering out through. And notice the next one is a light. There's a whole bunch of different kinds of light. So I'm going to create a regular just light like this. Okay, and I'm going to bring it up, scoot it over, scoot it over, scoot it up, hit Control R. And you'll see now I have some sort of lighting in my scene. It's not incredibly beautiful, but I have some lighting. You'll notice that he doesn't have shadows, right? There's a floor. Here's his feet. We have a light. We should have shadows there. In 3D, they don't turn those on automatically. In some instances, a lot of times, you don't want to have every single light having shadows. Most of the time, you'll have more lights without shadows than with shadows. When they did Nemo, in some of those scenes, there was 200 lights. Every one of those did not cast shadows, because otherwise the scene would just kill. It would just die. Heavily intense. So if I go in here and turn shadows on, and I hit a different angle, I'm at a weird angle right now. Now you'll see my guy has a shadow. Okay? We have to start from the very basics of stuff and then start adding things to make it look more and more complex, more and more realistic. Okay? The software will not do every single bit of work for us. It's not a drag and drop, I want to create this scene and then you make it look good. We have to know what settings to change to make it look good. Okay? This over here is our work, our object list. There's some other stuff here we'll get into eventually. This down here is where we're going to be changing all of our settings for stuff. So depending on what we have selected, different things will appear over there. So notice with my light, when I click the light, all of those little menu buttons pop up. Okay, we have, what is this, 11 different items. The floor only has the 2. All right, so we'll get more into this. Down here, this is our timeline. Oops, sorry, this is our timeline right here. So when we start animating stuff, we can start animating and adjusting our timeline very similar to After Effects. That's one of the reasons Cinema 4D is used so exclusively, is because of its motion graphics and because of its animation capabilities. And then further down here, this is our materials. Okay? So when I want the character to look a certain way, I can create a material, drop it on him, and then change how this is supposed to look. You don't have to worry about doing this part, but I just want to show. Now he's blue. And then I could add a texture to him, which will make him look even uglier. Oops, I don't want that one. There we go. Wonderful. Okay. So every step of this, we're going to have so many different things that we'll be going into. At some companies, there's people who just do one thing. There's some people who just do modeling. So they would be the ones who would drop in the guy, and they would be shaping him into the actual person who is in the end result. There are some people who would do texturing, which is giving them the color. So if the guy has dark skin or light skin or freckles or whatever, they would be doing the texturing for that. There's people who do just the lighting. There's people who do just the animation. There's people who just do the rigging. Those are at bigger studios like Pixar or ILM or Digital Domain or any of these big houses. Around here, at most of the places, you're going to find jack of all trades. You know a little bit about each area. You may not be an expert in animation, but you know enough to do what you need to do. You may not be an expert at modeling, but you know enough to do what you need to. Okay? So, cool. We also have menus along the top. You can see those. Okay? The interface for Cinema 4D is not incredibly complex. We have these couple spots that we'll be constantly working in, but for the most part, we won't have anything like insane. The hardest thing is going to be knowing which one of these areas we're supposed to be manipulating and how to get there. And then obviously the modeling stuff will be a little bit trickier. Okay? All right, so I'm going to make a new scene. Okay? Go to File, go to New Scene, or you can hit Control N, right? Now, when we went to New Scene, that old file is still open. Okay? So if I went to Window, and I went to Untitled 1, there he still is. All right, so that's another kind of neat thing that Cinema will do, where it will allow you to open up multiple documents. Some 3D software do not. All right, so I'm in this blank document. So what we want to do is we're going to start our mini room. Okay, we're going to build a box for our mini room, and then we're going to start populating stuff inside of it. Okay, so what shape should we build for just the basic structure of the room? A cube, right? That seems pretty simple. So let's create a cube. So we can just click on the cube up here. Now, a mistake that people make is that they make stuff super small. Okay? There is no budget in 3D right now. We can make this room as big as we want or as small as we want. It's always better to make it bigger than to make it smaller. Okay? So I'm going to grab my little squares here and stretch this out far. And stretch this out far. And I've even zoomed out so I can make it even bigger. Okay, so make it huge. Make it rectangular. Not crazy long. You don't want it to be a hallway. You want this to be a room. So what I want to do is make sure this is perfectly lined up with the height of it, at least, in there. Now, when I say perfect, it's like you don't have to zoom in 1,000%. We just want to get it closer than it probably is. So we want to see right on from the side view, what does this look like? Okay, so click your middle mouse button. The scroll wheel? Sorry. All right, and then we should see our views. And if you look at the views that you have, one of them says top. You don't want to touch the top view, leave that alone. You want to either go to the front or the right, and you want to move it up. So what I do is I look at the right view, and you can see how far I'm off. Okay, it's not much. Maybe this is a centimeter, maybe it's a foot. But I zoom in on the right view so I can see how close it is, and then I go to the front view and zoom in on the manipulator. And that way I can move it up. I'm going to zoom in a bit more. There we go. And now I'm just a bit closer than I was before. Okay, so I'll zoom into the bottom with my right camera. I'll zoom into the manipulator with my front view, and then I can move the front view's manipulator while looking at the right view's manipulator. Sounds obsessive, but trust me, when we get to moving objects in our scene and placing them, it'll just make it that much simpler. When you get into stuff that's for ILM or for Pixar, they actually would have the measurements of the room. If they're doing this room here, they would actually have the blueprints for it, and they would go by the blueprints to actually model this exactly how it should be. Okay? We don't need to worry about that. So to get back to this view, we just middle click, and we get back to that view. Lazy man's way, also you can just click this. Okay? Just that little button right there, and it'll get you in and out. All right. So we want to put stuff inside the room. If I zoom in, I get inside the room, but then I can't really navigate very good because I keep hitting this wall. Okay, so we want to open up one of the sides. So how do I get it so that I can edit the faces or edit the polygons of this? C. Right, we have to hit C first to make it editable, and then we go down here to polygon select. Okay, so we hit C to make it editable, polygon select. Then we can just click that face and hit delete. Okay, so polygon, delete the face. Now we can see in it. Now as we start placing objects, it's going to make it a lot easier to see where we're placing stuff, especially when we get into our lighting. Make sure you click on it. Hit spacebar. Now click on it. There we go. Okay. A tricky thing about the software. Remember I said we have this marquee selection tool? If you're in the marquee selection tool, which is the square one here, you can't actually click on stuff. You think you would be able to, but you can't. So you have to tap the spacebar again to get back to one of these tools, and then you can click stuff. Okay? So just be on the lookout. This area up here is selection stuff. So if you find you're not able to select a specific item, click there. Also check this area and make sure you're on the right object or component. We want to make sure we never move this box on accident, because it's very easy to be here and accidentally go like that, and now we have to get it back to where it's supposed to be. Okay? Sometimes, even I do it, I don't realize I've moved something, especially when I'm zoomed in working on something and I accidentally move it. Okay? So we want to lock this item in place so that we can't accidentally move it. All right? So this is where layers come in. We use layers for visibility, and we use layers for locking things, right? So we don't accidentally screw stuff up. So over here on the right, you'll see it says attributes and layers. We're going to click on layers. Now in order for us to add this to a layer, we have to make sure that we're on the object or modeling mode. Okay, so make sure you're in that modeling mode up here on the top left. Then go to File and say New Layer from Object Selection. Okay, the file right here, not the file way over there. This file. And then we'll give this a name. We'll call this shell or room or whatever you want to call it. Make sure you're clicked on the layers here. Right here on the far right. It means pop and lock. So we're just going to make sure that it's locked. And we really don't need to even see the object now, because we're going to start building other stuff. Okay? So we can actually turn the visibility off also. Is there a question, sir, or just your hand stretched? All right, now at any point we could pop open the layers, look at that room size to see if what we're doing looks good, and then turn it back off again. Okay, that's not a big deal. Yes, ma'am. If I turn this back on, I turn this lock back off. Do you see the color right there by shell? What color is it on mine? Orange. Look way up there at the top by my object. Do you see anything that is that same color? Okay, that way we know they're linked together. These two layers are on, or that object is on that layer. If we go here, we can add it to any layer. We can remove it from the layer. We can go to the layer manager, which is this thing. Okay. We can even change a color. So if we don't like that color, we can change it. Okay. So that's important. Now there is a weird thing. They may have fixed this in later versions. If I have one object and it's grouped, okay, I have to add each item to the layer, not just the group. It's very stupid. All right, so I'm going to lock it. I'm going to turn the visibility off. Yes, sir.
After you have the layer, is anything like the images you create, are they automatically going to go on the layer, or do you have to specify?
No, you would have to specify that you want them to be on the new layer. Okay, so if I make a cube now, it doesn't default to that. It'll just be on this empty layer until I assign it to something. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am?
So you can't work in the layer, it's kind of like you have to set it after you're done?
No, you can work in the layer still.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you can work in the layer. So at any point, I could have created the cube, made the layer, dropped it on there, and then done all the work. Typically, I work like this. Model the whole thing and then drop it on there. I may come back and tweak stuff later, but that's typically how I work. And as you start building stuff, always add it to the layer. So I build it, get it set up, and then add it to the layer. Now the reason that I wouldn't want to, let's say, model a cube and then add it to the layer and then start working on it, it has a construction history. Okay, so as we build a cube and we start deleting stuff and adding stuff and tweaking it, it'll actually change the name of the shape and actually could pull it off that layer as we're working. Okay, so I typically wait until I'm done with it and then we'll throw it onto that layer. Okay, you'll see that as we go. All right, so we're done with the layers for the moment. I'm going to switch back to my attributes. That way I can see the new stuff as I create it. All right. So we are going to be creating a desk. It's going to be a simple desk. This will be, should we do desk first? No, we'll do a bookcase first. Okay. We always want to have reference. Always want to look stuff up to see what I'm going to be building. Because what happens is, you get in the mindset of, I know what that looks like, and then you go to build it and it's like, oh, it's horrible. Why? Because I didn't look anything up. Okay? And not that it's just students. I do it all the time too, except when I get reference. All right, so we're going to build a bookcase. Something simple. No, that's better. Okay, something simple like one of these guys here, or even that one is perfect. Okay, Billy Bookcase will build from IKEA. So what we want to do is we want to look at the overall shape of this. So what is the overall shape of this? Cube, right? That's what the overall shape looks like. It looks like a big cube with some stuff kind of like knocked in, right? So that's what we're going to start with. So let's go back to Cinema. Let's create a cube. Now here's where the proportions are going to come into play. Our room could be any size, right? There's no specific dimensions as to how wide a room is or how long a room is. That all varies. But a bookcase has to make sense because you're going to be putting books on it. So we can't have it be that narrow. That doesn't make sense, okay? So we have to find just a good proportion for it. So looking at the Billy bookcase, I'd say that's pretty close. Ignore what you see on the projector as far as my proportions, because the projector is squishing my stuff. It looks really square up there, but it is rectangular on my screen, okay? So I have this a bit tall. I'm going to squish that in a little bit more. Okay. Now the process we're going to go through for this is simple, okay? So if you don't like the way that your bookcase turns out the first time, no big deal. You can make another one probably in like 5 minutes. Looking at this bookcase, we have an opening, an opening, and an opening. Ignore the stuff that's happening down there, okay? Opening, opening, opening. That's all we have. Okay, we have 3 shelves in there. I could cut a big hole right here and then model extra cubes and use those for the shelves. It's a bit more complex than I want to go right now. Okay, I want to, again, create this the simplest way possible. So looking at this edge here, this here, this here, this there, I'm going to start adding in some divisions. Okay, and what the divisions will allow me to do is extrude, meaning push part of it in or pull part of it out in certain spots. Okay.
It's like Mr. Lemon SketchUp.
Yeah, that's exactly SketchUp. So for each one of these shelves or each one of those areas, I need to make sure that I have a line there. All right. We're going to turn on our display. So I'm going to go up to the top where it says display, and I'm going to go to lines. Okay, so where it says display, I go to lines. Now over here in the right side, it says segments. That's where I'm going to start to increase those segments. So notice how was that?
Oh, I see.
Yep. So I'm just going to click and drag until I get enough of them. Yep. So I need 7 segments because I have 7 different areas inside that model. Okay, so change your segments in the Y direction to 7. And then how do we know which direction that one is? Look at the blue arrow. See how the blue arrow is going that direction? So that would be Z. So then we would just put 3 in for Z. Okay, so we have 1 for X, 7 for Y, and 3 for Z. Yeah, if you modeled yours the other way, then you would put it in X.
Okay.
Okay.
I was like, why is it mine looks just like yours?
Right. If you rotated yours or your scene was going the other way, then definitely put it in for X. Nothing that I do up here is ever going to match 100% what you're going to be doing. You drag your cube out, you might drag it a different way than I did. Okay? Be flexible with all of this. If I put it in Z and yours is in X, no big deal. Just be aware of it. Okay? You would have to just move the points back this way and then back out the other way. But yeah, it's no big deal. Eventually, it's all going to end the same. You're going to be able to have an object that you can rotate and put wherever you want. All right? So now that we have our divisions, 7 and 3, now we can hit the C key. Okay? Because we're done adding those segments. Now, I'll show you after we're done with this one how we could have added those a different way after the fact. Okay? After we hit C. All right. So now would this look like an appropriately sized bookcase where we have these dimensions? Does it look like those are spaced out the same way as what we have inside of our 3D application? No, they're completely uniform in our 3D application, and over there they're not uniform. Okay, so how do we get to a view where we can look at just a head-on shot of the front view or the side view? What was that? Middle mouse? Yes, middle mouse. So click your middle mouse. And I'm also going to hit O. Okay, so I move my mouse over each one of these little things. And I hit O. That way I can see each one of these. I want to find the view that looks like this. That looks like the front view of that camera. Okay, and I'm going to middle click right there. All right. So might be hard for you to see, but you can see where I have my stuff, right? You can see that's the view I'm looking at. So now what I want to do is I want to be able to grab these edges and move them so that it looks like that drawing. Okay? So how do we move edges? The edge tool, right? This thing right here. So if I just click on the edges there, then I can start moving these. Now the way to move them is that we don't just click on an edge and move it, because watch what it's going to do. See how it doesn't move this edge or that edge correct way? So we want to double click the edge. And when we do that, it selects all the edges all the way around. Okay? So just double click the edge and then you can move it. And then double click the edge and then you can move it. Now the idea here is to make sure that the shelving is all evenly spaced. Okay? Don't be too nitpicky with it. The idea is just to get something kind of set up in there. I wanted to take these two here, and let's just pretend that they're like incredibly far apart. Like that. Okay? Now I want to bring these two closer together. Instead of just grabbing the one and moving it, I can actually go to the scale tool and grab just this scale and bring those closer together. Okay? And then move them to where I need them. Now, this is our practice one, so don't be worried if it doesn't turn out magnificent. Okay? You can make 100 of these in probably an hour once you've gone through the process a couple times. One thing that people will get messed up on is this. If I grab this edge and I go like that, that looks the same, but it's not. Okay? Because I've taken this edge that's on the inside and I pushed it to the outside. And so 3D software is going to look really ugly when we create that. So just be aware, never cross the streams. Okay?
I knew that was.
All right, so that looks pretty close. All right, good enough. So I'm going to get out of this window, go back to that window. Okay, middle click out of one, middle click back into that one. And now what I want to do is I want to get back to seeing this in shaded mode because this wireframe is driving me nuts. I'm going to go to display and say Grad shading lines. Okay, so that's what I end up with. Okay, now just so you can see this, bless you, when I go above here, you can definitely see that there's something odd happening. Okay, that definitely doesn't look right compared to what that looks like. Okay, So again, stuff to just kind of be on the lookout for. You don't have to worry about it this very second if you have something like that. That process, do it 5 times and you'll be a whiz at getting it here, okay? So now what we need to do is push in these areas. So which object of these does it look like I could grab just this whole area? Faces or polygons, right? Cinema calls them polygons, I call them faces. Okay, now I can't do this. I can't just grab these 3 and go like that because that does not work. Yes, sir. Display and then garage shading. But make sure you're in your perspective view again. There you go. Okay, so I can't just grab these and push it in because it doesn't work. Okay, I have to do what's called an extrusion. An extrusion keeps all the lines I don't have selected still there, and it'll just take these faces and shove them into the box. Okay, so hotkey for the extrude key of the extrude tool is D. Okay, so if I just hit the D key, my cursor has now changed to this weird little box. So I'm going to do this and then I'll walk around and help people. Okay, so I've selected my 3 faces. I hit the D key. Now I'm going to click and drag to push it in.
I help control it.
All right, so there is our bookcase. Now, for speed-wise, we don't need to worry about this for this assignment, but just to point it out. Okay, for speed-wise, there are certain things that we will never ever see on this bookcase, right? So like the bottom here, there are 3 faces that as long as our bookcase is standing vertically, we will never see. So we could delete those faces.
And save on my polygon.
Right, and save on polygons. The back, all of these, you don't have to delete these, I'm just showing you. Our faces will probably never ever see. So again, we could delete all those out. It's not necessary to do that. But for speed, if you ever got into video gaming or something, or mobile, it's very important to be efficient with all of your models. If you have a polygon on there, it has to have a reason for having it. Okay. Now this may sound odd too. I'm going to use the knife tool real quick, and I'm going to put a loop. Okay. So you see how we have this extra edge that hangs out in the middle? That edge doesn't need to be there. Okay, because it serves no purpose to the actual end model. All it is just a random edge in the middle. So that's another thing that in the video game world we would remove. There we go. So now he's gone. Okay.
Is there a special delete for that? Or are you going to have issues with what's left over?
No, that was a special delete. When I right clicked and went to melt,
No?
yeah, it just melts it in there. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to turn the visibility back on our room and then put our bookcase in the room. You may have to scale it up. That's no big deal. You go to scale and you scale it up. Just move it off to the side. Put it against a wall. Remember, you can hold shift if you want to rotate so that snaps. It's most likely a ridiculous scale too.
It's not letting me.
Alright, you can continue playing and organizing that, getting it in the exact spot you want. I'm just going to show a couple extra things. So, the same process that we just did. Here's how we can do, like I said, the picture frame or the TV or any of that stuff. So if I have a picture frame, and these are the proportions of my picture frame. It's a portrait picture frame. Let's say it's like that. Perfect. I hit C on this. I'm going to grab that face, and instead of doing the regular extrude, which is just pushing stuff in, okay, which is not going to look weird, or which will look weird, I'm going to do a different extrude. I'm going to do an extrude inner.
Did you get that menu?
You right click. And then I'm going to extrude in like this. So do you see how now I've created a little border around the picture frame area? Then I can go to my regular extrude, and then I can push that in. Okay, so there's my picture frame. Now, the same way that I made the picture frame, I would just take that and I would rotate it this way, and now it's a TV. Okay, in the 3D world, we can multi-purpose things, posters, whatever. Okay. Here's another way that I could do that exact bookcase. So if I started off with a basic cube, get it somewhat positioned where I want it, good enough, and I hit C on here. It's not C yet. I go back to this. I'm going to put 3 divisions in this area. Should be good. I'll put 3 divisions in this area. Okay, so I just have this like tic-tac-toe board. Now I'm going to go to my edges and I'm going to grab these 2 edges and push them out. So I'm going to scale them out. I'm going to grab this edge here and this edge here. I'm going to right click and I'm going to say bevel. And see how bevel automatically splits those right where I would need them. Okay? And then I'm going to go to my knife tool and I'm going to add a loop right there. Restrict the selection. Right there. Okay. So now I've basically created that same structure that we just had on the other one using different properties. Okay? So there's no right way or wrong way to model something. It's all about your way of doing it. Okay? This way here is obviously a bit more complex as far as the tools go, but it allows me to start at a point and just work my way towards it. This way I have to basically see the end and then start planning backwards for how I want that to be. Okay? So it's different ways to work. People will actually model better one way over the other. Okay? And as you get into the class and you start going through some of the assignments, you'll find that you may gravitate towards a different way of modeling than what I'm doing. I'm showing you the end result. I'm showing you how I would get to it. I can show you 10 different ways to get that exact result, but I want you to be able to at least play with the stuff to see. Okay? All right, so now we have, I have a tiny desk, or a tiny thing there, and then this. Let's throw this back there. Okay, so now let's add some color to our scene, because now it's looking kind of drab. I'm going to go to my bookcase, I'm going to hit O, so I frame it, and then I'm going to add a material. Okay, so remember, materials allow us to give color and texture stuff. All right? As you're doing these things, make sure you're in the right mode. So sometimes when you're doing materials, you want to be selecting faces or polygons, right? You want to be over here on this menu. Sometimes you want to be in the object or the model, which is up here. Okay? If I want one color on my entire object, I would make sure that I'm on here when I select that object. If I want certain parts to be different colors, I would be on here and I would select those certain things. So do you see anything in this scene that we have so far where I may want one object to have different colors on it? The picture frame, right? So if I have a picture frame, the center of it, I may want to put a picture, and then the frame I would want to be obviously wood or plastic or metal or whatever it is. Also the room, I may want the floor to have one texture, the walls to have a different texture, and the ceiling to have another different texture. Okay? So just be aware of those instances and be aware of how to get from this menu button to that menu button and when you want to do that. All right. So this is going to be a very basic color to it for right now. So I don't have to have it selected, but I'm going to double click down here. This area at the bottom is where we make materials. So if you just double click, it'll create a material for you. Okay. Now the item that popped up is they just call it a material. All right. If you double click right in this window there. There you
Ah.
go. If you double click that, it'll pop it up into a window that you can see a little bit bigger than the bottom right corner. Typically, I don't pop it up when I work. I leave it all down here. For you to be able to see it better, I do open it up so you can see it better. But this here is the same as this here, with the exception of these extra tabs. In this window, they're under basic. In this window, obviously, they're all right there. Okay? So the way that materials work is we have to build up the material to look like what we want. Okay? So in the simplest sense, a red piece of metal is not just red metal inside here. We have to give it a red color. We have to tell it how shiny it is. We have to tell it how much reflection there is. We have to tell it if there's any transparency. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into making red metal look like red metal, except for just picking a color and letting it go. Okay? Initially, we're going to do just that. We're going to give it some basic parameters. Eventually, we'll build up to making it look better and better. Okay? So if we pick red and it doesn't look like red metal, just ignore it for now. Eventually, we'll get there. Okay? So I'm going to go to my color and I'm going to pick a color. You can do it with this. Has anyone ever not used an HSV or HSB slider before? You haven't? Okay. So the HSV or HSB is actually, I prefer this because it makes color selection like 1,000 times easier. If you go with RGB, you're dealing with red, green, and blue, and you're constantly mixing these colors to get the color you want. Okay? With HSV or B, the top one is always going to be your hue. So this is like what is your purest color. Okay? So if I want red, I can just slide this over to red. If I want green, I go into the green area.
Oh, it's hue saturation color.
Right. Yep, and then S is saturation, so how much of that green is saturated. And then V or B is just the value or brightness. I don't know why some people pick one or the other, but it's the simplest way to do it. Okay? Especially when you're picking colors, it makes it a lot easier because you can just say, okay, I want this red, but then I want to just change the saturation for these other items that are related to that red, instead of trying to pick and mix colors. It's too difficult. All right, so for my bookcase, I'm going to go with something orangey. There we go. Like, it looks kind of brownish, tannish color. Cool. All right. So this right here is a little sample of what that color is going to look like. So you'll see that we get, we do get a color. This dark ring right there is just showing you some shading. That's all that's for. Okay. We also have the other box that's checked is reflectance, which is basically reflection. Okay. If you go into that reflectance area and you choose, instead of layers, you choose default specular, you're going to get a bunch more options. Okay, so if you go to the reflectance tab and you choose default specular, you'll get a whole bunch more options. Again, we're keeping it simple. There's a whole bunch of other stuff we can get into, which we will touch on, just not right now. A bookcase, like a regular bookcase, is not shiny like chrome. It's a very diffused reflection on it, or diffused specular. Something like this has a very diffused reflection where you don't really see a reflection in it, but you do see some shine. This, you're seeing more of a reflection and shine to it. Okay? So this little bump right here, that's a good amount for where we're at. Okay? All that does basically is say, give us a little bit of reflection or a little bit of specular on there, and that's good enough. So I'm going to leave it like that. Eventually we can get into playing with it of how exactly this is spread out and how our reflections are all working. Okay? For now, we're just going to leave it. We do want to name this, so I'm going to go back to my basic tab and just rename this bookcase underscore material. Okay. So we created a material, we clicked on it, we changed the color, gave it a name, and then we just changed the reflectance to default specular. Okay, that's all we've done. Do you see anywhere else where we may want to start renaming stuff? Right, in our object list, cube 1, cube 2, cube 3, that's going to be difficult to figure out when we have 20 objects in our scene, right? So you'll see that the bottom one here, on mine at least, is grayed out. That's my room. It's locked.
Color got super dark out in the
I'll look at that in a second.
Oh.
I'm going to unlock my room so that I could rename this to be room shell. I'm going to grab cube 1, call this bookcase 1. Put my TV. Alright, and you don't need to worry about locking your room again because we're going to be giving it some color in a second. Okay. Once you have your rooms or your items labeled, this is how easy it is to add textures to stuff. So we created this material. It's just a definition of what that looks like. So if we have 10 bookcases that we all want the same color, or we have 2 bookcases we want that color, and a desk and a lamp, all we have to do is drag this onto each one of those items and it'll automatically assign it to it. Okay? So I grab the bookcase, drag it onto that item, and now it has that color. Alright? Now notice too that when I did that, in my object mode or my object menu up there, it put that little icon associating it with that item. That way I can see the bookcase has this material on it. Okay? So now I'm going to do the same thing for my room. So I'm going to double click, make this bigger so you can see it. I'm going to call this room walls material.
Oh.
Okay, now with this one, when I assign it, it's different, right? Because this is just the walls. So how do I isolate just the walls with this? What was that? Faces? Yep. So I grab faces. There it is. So I have these 3 faces selected. I grab the room wall and I drag it on top of it. Okay, and it just assigns that material to those 3 faces. All right, real quick, one more point I want to show here, and then we're going to wrap it up. Notice how on my bookcase here, remember I assigned a material to the entire object, right? And then over here in my object list, it puts that material, right? So we can see what's connected. When I did that to my room shell and I grabbed components of it and I drug that onto the component of it, like the face for the floor, the face for the sides, the face for the ceiling, look at what we have here. Here is my walls, and then there's this little triangle. And then here is my floor, and then a triangle, and then a ceiling, and then a triangle. This triangle is called a tag, okay? And it's basically a way for Cinema to say these items in this selection are assigned to the floor. So this stuff, eventually we'll start manipulating it, but right now if I were to go through and delete these things out, you'll see what ends up happening, right? It's just gray again, all right? So we have to be aware of what these things are in here, and you'll also see that when I click on this, my selection now says polygon selection _3, meaning that this triangle is connected to that. And very quickly I could, if I needed to, just drag this in here and it'll change it, or drag this one in here and it'll change it, or drag the original back in and it'll change it. Okay? So just be aware that we will manipulate stuff in that box area. These things are important to pay attention to. Also, if you were to have grabbed one face and assigned it, and grabbed another face and assigned it, and another face and assigned it, you would have 3 different or 3 extra pieces up here. Okay, one or two extra pieces, one for each extra thing that you've done. All right, cool. All right, let's save our work. So hit Control S. The segments, you do that before you hit C.
I don't remember how to.
Oh, how to add them?
Yeah.
Down here under attributes, it'll say objects, and then you add them there. I'll be over there in a second. Okay. So you're going to go to save your stuff, go to this PC, go to your fall 2017 folder. Oops, I went on my wrong drive.
I just put a logo with P.
Yeah, either way, just the P drive is what we want to get to. And then you're going to go into your mini room, and where it says scenes, that's where you're going to save this scene. So call it your last name underscore mini room underscore 01.
Totally forgot I had a second screen right here.
Okay, so your last name underscore mini room underscore 01. That way we know whose it is, we know what it is, and the 01 is the iteration of it. Okay? Next time we come in, guess what we're going to save it as? 02. All right? Every time you come in, save as something else. You never know what's going to happen. If you only save one file, and this happens all the time, you save one file, you work on it for 2-3 weeks, and that file goes away, 2 or 3 weeks is gone. Right? You got to start back over. If you save it as 01, 02, 03, 04, and 04 gets gone, then you can always jump back to 03. I have people who are obsessive about it, and they will even save every hour as a different brand new name. I've had people do it every half hour as a different name. Okay? The idea is never always save as often as you feel like you can go back and redo that work, right? So if you only save once a class and you're fine redoing the last 3 hours, then that's up to you. If you only want to redo the last 20 minutes, then do that. Save often, but save as at least once a day when you work, okay? All right, so now we can close Cinema. You don't have to save your other project if you don't want to. And folders, there we go. So you should have your folder for F17 right there. You want to take that and throw that onto your external hard drive, right? When you come in on Monday, should be there, but we don't know if the person next to you or tomorrow or this weekend is going to accidentally delete your stuff. So make sure you put it on an external hard drive, or if you have a Dropbox account, Dropbox it into that Dropbox account. All right, any questions?